Welcome to the Rewarding Retirement Podcast, where Aaron Kirsch, a certified financial planner, and Laura Zettel-Watson, a professor of psychology, discuss research-based concepts and strategies for you to live your best life based on their book, The Rewarding Retirement Workbook.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Laura Zettel-Watson.
And I'm Aaron Kirsch. On today's podcast, we're going to talk about stepping off of the treadmill, finding lasting happiness. Laura, when we talk about retirement, we talk a lot in the book that we wrote about freedom, about how retirement equals freedom. Do you want to expand a little bit about freedom and why we talk about that?
Sure, Aaron. We talk about freedom because I think, honestly, we want to make sure that this is not something that people are dreading or fearing or thinking about in the context of loss. Retirement doesn't have to be about loss. I know in a previous podcast, we talked about how folks are really tied to that identity of what their career is. But I think reshaping the whole idea of retirement and talking about it in terms of freedom, living the way you want to live, not the way you feel you should have to live, it really is a type of freedom. And as we start to drop some of these roles that frankly kind of constrict us earlier in life, we really do start to experience freedom and being who we want to be and being able to do what we want to do.
And we may have mentioned this before in the podcast, but we certainly talk about this in the book. Retirement is the first time you really have true freedom. When you're young, you've got your parents telling you what to do, right? When you're in college, you have a lot of freedom, but mom and dad still own the bank. You're still reliant on them. Then you've got your career. Some of us have family obligations, things like that. So retirement is really that first point in your life where you have the opportunity to do what you want to do, not what you have to do.
Absolutely. And this is a phase too, when you mentioned the parents owning the bank. In retirement, hopefully now you've got some expendable income that you can now make choices about how you want to spend it. And there's no need to impress anyone anymore. This is about what you want to do. Your time becomes your own. And I think that is the key that we're trying to drive home to folks with our book is this is your opportunity to shape that into whatever you want.
And then we've spent decades doing things as a responsible adult, and now it's time you get to have fun and you don't have to follow the rules anymore. Well, probably shouldn't be driving 105 miles per hour on the freeway, but you can be unconventional. You don't have to make a boss happy. You don't have to make anyone happy but yourself. And happiness is what it's all about, and happiness is the topic for today. Exactly.
And I think this is what we all spend our entire working careers dreaming about is, well, when I retire, well, now do it. That's what we do. We embrace it and we do those things we've been talking about all these years. So
Right.
Now is the time to really get into this freedom.
Right.
What are we going to do with this freedom? Aaron, what are you going to do with your freedom?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, what am I going to do with the freedom? How am I going to take advantage of it to do all the things I want to do? And it requires some introspection on my part and all of our listeners, introspection on your part about what truly makes you happy. And if you think back in life, I challenge you all to think about things in life that moments that brought you happiness, that brought you the deepest happiness. Were they achievements that you had in life? Were they experiences on vacations or time with friends and family? Was it the relationships you had? Of these happy moments, were they just you or did they involve other people? And think about what kind of patterns do you see? How can those patterns guide you to think about what's going to really make you happy when you retire, when you experience that freedom and you get to do what you want and get to plan your happiness?
And I love that you gave all those different types of examples because happiness means something different to every single person. For some people, it's about experiences. And others, it's totally about the relationships. They don't care what they're doing. What they care about is who they're doing it with. And so I think that's where that introspection really comes into play. This is our opportunity to define what that means for each individual person. And I think that's what our book tries to help folks do, is build that from the ground up and really think about where our happiness comes from on an individual basis.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about what happiness really means. And there's different philosophies, but some people say that happiness isn't just a single moment in time or a possession or a thing that you have. It's an ongoing process of becoming your ideal self. There's another researcher named Harari who said that happiness is seeing your life in its entirety as meaningful and worthwhile. Laura, you're a psychologist. Everyone has different terminologies, and psychology has its own nomenclature for it. But let's talk a little bit about how psychologists see happiness.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just as I just mentioned, how every single one of us has a different way of defining happiness, I would say there are almost as many definitions in psychology about what happiness is. Some folks or some researchers drill down into trying to identify happiness at the core level. Is this about our emotions? Is happiness about things like, finding contentment and joy in things? Other people say, no, it's about, finding life pleasurable. Some others say it has a lot to do with life satisfaction. Still others try to say, well, what can predict happiness? And we know that, again, just like every single one of us is going to have a different definition, we're all going to have different factors that play into our happiness. And it's one of those variables in psychology when we're doing research that, really relates to almost all the pieces, but on an individual level. And I think that's what makes it so difficult to study, but also so exciting from our perspective to try to help people find where they're finding their joy.
Let's break down two different concepts of happiness now. And forgive me if I pronounce this wrong. You can correct me, Laura, because you're the expert on this. But there's two ways to look at happiness in one framework. One is called hedonia. Did I pronounce that right?
So far, so good.
Okay, and eudaimonia. And so let's talk a little bit about the difference between hedonia and eudaimonia. Hedonia is pleasure. It's instant gratification. It's having a favorite meal or a day at the beach or going to a concert or having that ice cream. It's this immediate pleasure that you get. And then eudaimonia is long-term purpose. It's like learning something new or volunteering at a charity or building on your health or having some kind of achievement or creating something meaningful.
That's absolutely right. And I think, hedonia is from the same root as when we say hedonism, right? And we kind of think of that as bad. But I think it's really critical to understand that we really need both of these aspects in our life to have a balanced life. If we were completely hedonistic all the time, that wouldn't necessarily bode well for our future. We're making decisions now. I always like to think of this one when I talk to my students about it as in, the kind of decisions we make. I want to have a burger, fries, and a milkshake because it's delicious. And I can do that occasionally, but if I do that for every single meal, I'm setting myself up for poor health and a whole bunch of future problems. So having that balance and being able to see, okay, today is a day I can be a little hedonistic and make some choices so that I don't feel like my life is being deprived of anything. But I also have to think about the long-term purpose in my life. What am I doing that is going to really set me up for success in the long term? And I think that's where the eudaimonia comes in, where I have to have something grounding me for the long term so that I've got something that I'm building toward. So really that striking that balance, I think, is going to be the really important part. And that stays important in later life. It's not just something we have to balance when we're younger. This is something we have to continue making sure we're successfully balancing those so that we can continue enjoying life on the day-to-day basis, but still having those long-term goals. I think, we say it in the book, right? You are chasing your big goals, but you're able to savor the occasional treat.
Right. And it's understandable that these two can be in conflict. Balance is really important, but right, you've got this conflict. Maybe you have a goal of weight loss, but it's still important to have that occasional ice cream cone every now and then so you don't feel completely deprived.
Exactly.
And following up on hedonia, there's something that a couple of psychologists back in 1971 came up with, this concept of the hedonic treadmill. Can you go into a little bit about that?
I think this is, one of those original concepts in psychology that it really is going to help us to put into context how we deal with our hedonic urges over time, right? So if as humans, we are wanting to kind of be chasing that burst, that excitement, right? But if we are in a constant state of excitement, we start to attune into that where it stops feeling exciting because it becomes our new normal. So then we're trying to chase a higher high. And this idea of the treadmill is you really need to experience highs and lows, or you're not going to notice the difference between the highs and lows. And I think we've heard people talk about this in life too. Like, and this is something I've even, told my teenage kids, like, you have to have the bad days so you know when a good day is in your presence. So if you don't have the lows, you won't know when something's the high, and vice versa. If something is always high, it becomes your stable, it becomes your normal, and you try to chase a higher high. So these are the kinds of things, we've given examples like getting a job promotion or buying your dream home or a brand new car. Super exciting when it first happens, and then you attune to that. The happiness boost fades as we start to adapt. And this is common in the opposite direction too. When you have a negative event, our happiness might plummet, but we recover over time. We don't stay in those doldrums.
I'm thinking back to just my own personal cars. The first car I got, if I was driving that car today, I would not be happy, right? Because I started off with a hand-me-down from my parents. It was an old, rusted brown Toyota Corona, right? And then I got my next car, which was something that I had bought brand new. It was a really nice Honda Civic, right? And then, every time I get a new car, it's a step up. And that becomes my new normal. So if I were to go back to that first car, I wouldn't be so happy. And I'm always chasing the next car. So I'm would I be happy with a Ferrari? Yeah, I would be. But once I got that Ferrari, I'd be initially really happy. But then that would become my new normal. And then I don't know, what's the next car up? What's the next car up from a Ferrari, Laura?
I'm not there yet. I'll let you know when I get there.
Okay, all right. And it's interesting too, if you look at lottery winners, they're thrilled initially, but then their life kind of goes back to normal, and they complain about people coming after them for loans and money and things like that. So and there's also some research about people who've been into a terrible accident who've become paraplegic, and initially things are terrible for them, but after about 6 to 12 months, their life's kind of back to where it was, and they're just continuing on. So that's the hedonic treadmill. And when we think about retirement, when you're retired, there are some aspects of retirement that make you less susceptible to be on that hedonic treadmill, and there's some things that make you more susceptible. So if you think about retirement, you don't have status issues, right? You're not trying to get that job promotion or get a higher title or get a higher salary. You're retired, right? And you have more time control. You have more control over your choices. So you become less susceptible to that. And you're trying to shift your life toward intrinsic rewards like relationships and hobbies and learning. So that helps you get off that treadmill. But if you are interested in improving your lifestyle, like getting that bigger house or buying more toys or having luxury trips, you can kind of still be on that treadmill. And also, if you're worried about, we talk about this a lot, you're replacing your work achievements with a new identity. What's your new status now as a retiree because you're no longer working? These are ways to be stuck on that treadmill.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think maybe some of our listeners are thinking, well, how do I, get off the treadmill? What can I do if I catch myself trying to feel like I'm chasing? How do I maybe self-correct? And we do have some suggestions for that. We kind of come up with a 4-part framework that can assist in getting folks to step off that hedonistic treadmill, right? So the very first step I would suggest is really just figuring out what your core values are, trying to clarify to yourself what matters to you most. For some of us, that's going to be our personal relationships. For others, it might be our health. Still others might be considering things like, their creativity. How can they continue to be productive and stay creative as they age? Maybe it's doing service learning. All of these kinds of things can be options of what our core values might be. And if we can start there, first identify our values, which is what one of the very first steps we have folks do in our workbook, that really creates sort of a nice filter for folks to use when they're trying to base these decisions on their actual internal values as opposed to chasing novelty or status.
Right. That's great. And then, so after clarifying your core values, another thing to think about is trying to invest in experiences and not things. So think about travel, think about hobbies, think about spending time with friends and family to create lasting memories rather than buying that toy, buying that new car, buying that new kitchen appliance, whatever that is, right? Because possessions, initially, they give that boost in satisfaction, but after time, that kind of fades, but experiences stay with you forever.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And along with investing in experiences, our third step is going to be to suggest that you build purpose into your routine. So it's easy for folks to fall into a routine post-retirement, just like we have a routine during our working lives. But it's important to make sure that whatever we're doing on a daily basis has purpose, provides meaning to us. So whether you're volunteering or mentoring, starting a personal project, trying to create something, in every one of those instances, if you have purpose, if you can find purpose in what you're doing, that's going to allow you to sustain joy far longer than any material rewards you could be getting for those things.
Right. That's a great point, Laura. And then finally, gratitude, practicing mindfulness, regularly noticing and appreciating what you have and what's good around you and what things are doing well right now for you. That's really important. This kind of helps you elevate your baseline and really appreciate life and not feel like there's something else that's going to make things better. If you appreciate what you have, if you appreciate the relationships you have, if you appreciate everything that's good and got you to this point, that is a real good way to appreciate your life and create true lasting happiness.
And I think it might help a little if we kind of illustrate to our listeners a little bit about what these paths might look like. And so I, kind of think what I would like to see. I'm not yet retired, but I do fondly think about it often. And this is one I could see myself a little trap falling into, this idea of being where I might get stuck on a treadmill. You buy the new boat. Would always love to have a boat. Buy a boat, upgrade to a bigger, fancier house, take back-to-back luxury trips. That's the top of my list, is all the places I still want to see in the world. And I absolutely envision being thrilled at this lifestyle. This is what I am working for now, is to be able to do all of those things someday, hopefully sooner rather than later. But if that is my life, after a year, after a couple of years, the boat starts to feel like work. The house is just where I live now. The trips are all blurring together. I will likely be asking myself, what's next? And start to feel restless again, won't I?
Right. You're stuck on that treadmill.
How do I get off the treadmill? What does that look like?
Well, getting off the treadmill is more like you start your mornings with a nice cup of coffee, relaxed, sitting on your porch. You call your friends and your family weekly. You volunteer a couple times a month at a local charity that you believe in. When you travel, instead of going to these exotic places and living the life, maybe you go to travel and visit friends and family. And maybe you pick up a musical instrument just because you love to play music and you've always wanted to learn to play an instrument. So after that, years later, your life is a lot more simple. You don't have that boat to worry about, that bigger house to worry about, but you have steady joy. You appreciate what you have, and it's just a more meaningful way to live your retirement.
And what's interesting is, when you put it that way, individually, none of those things seemed exciting. And I think me picking up a musical instrument would actually not be good for the rest of my family. But, those are the types of things when people look back on at the end of life and say, what brought me joy? It is those experiences. It's those those events and activities that just made them feel closer to other people and that made them feel like they were contributing in some way, leaving a legacy behind. So I think it's really just, for many of us, re-envisioning based on our core values. And the book helps us do that.
That's great. Well, let's just talk a little bit as we come to the end of this podcast about some takeaways. One of the things we've talked about is that the pursuit of pleasure alone has minimal long-term impact, but it is necessary. You need to have some pleasure in life. You can't deprive yourself. We've talked about having engagement in life, being fully involved in your activities. That strongly predicts your life satisfaction. Having meaning in your life is a lot more important than having things in your life. And in retirement, if you focus on engagement and meaning and not just leisure and pleasure, you will have a happier retirement.
And I think, to present a challenge to our listeners, something that you can start now to think about and to really start putting this into practice. Give yourself a hedonic and a eudaimonic goal. For hedonic goals, schedule one purely pleasurable activity for yourselves this week. Whether it be you're going to go out for your favorite meal, you're going to take a bubble bath time just for you, you're going to go see a movie that's out that you've been hoping to see, something just for you. Taking a nature walk, leave the kids behind, do something guilt-free just for you. And schedule something eudaimonic. Start one meaningful long-term goal, whether it's learning a new skill that's going to bring you joy, volunteering somewhere, creating something, training for something. You wanted to start running that 5K, maybe start stretching. Do something that's going to get you a little closer to those long-term goals.
Okay, everyone, that's your challenge for this week. One hedonic goal and one eudaimonic goal. So let's talk just to close about having a mindset shift when you retire so that you can reach that happiness. So we're moving from I should do this or I have to do this to I choose to do this. You get to live by your values and not by other people's expectations. You're moving from impressing other people to expressing yourself, being authentic, doing what you're passionate about. You're moving from accumulating stuff to experiencing life and prioritizing relationships, memories, and things like that over stuff and possessions. And you've earned this. You have the permission to do this now. As you move into retirement, you can prioritize your happiness instead of doing all the things that you have to do. There's actually a good ripple effect. When you're happy, it affects everyone around you, your family, your friends, everyone who you come in contact with. Happiness it can be contagious.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And with that, I think we put a closing call to action out to all of our listeners. It's really recognizing that the real luxury in retirement isn't in what's new to you. It's in what's meaningful to you. And if you found any of this meaningful or helpful, we hope that you'll share this episode with friends and family who are looking for happier, more fulfilling retirement. And we also hope that you'll go get the Rewarding Retirement Workbook. It's available on Amazon, and it will absolutely help you step by step in designing your ideal post-work life.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. I hope you got something meaningful out of this episode. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Absolutely.
All right, everyone, get out there and make it a happy day.
Aaron Kirsch is a wealth advisor at Greenup Street Wealth Management, LLC, DBA Greenup Wealth Management, an investment advisor registered under the Investment Advisors Act of 1940. Registration as an investment advisor does not imply any level of skill or training. The oral and written communications of an advisor provide you with information about which you determine to hire or retain an advisor. For more information, please visit advisorinfo.sec.gov and search for our firm name. This representation has been provided for informational purposes only and is not intended as legal or investment advice or a recommendation of any particular security or strategy. The investment strategy and themes discussed herein may be unsuitable for investors depending on their specific investment objectives and financial situation. Information obtained from third-party sources is believed to be reliable, though its accuracy is not guaranteed. Opinions expressed in this commentary reflect subjective judgments of the author based on conditions at the time of publication and are subject to change without notice. Past performance is not indicative of future results.